Hi everyone, my name is Perez. So the following SQL presentation will focus on how to develop a diabetic registry using a database. To determine which data I would need, I went through a few research papers on diabetic registries and picked one by Jeffrey Hamel, which describes how to build a computerized disease registry for chronic illness management of diabetes. From there, I was able to get the information that I needed to populate my table. And this were like lab works, dates, values, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, the creatine clearance level, and all the other lab information that I will need to effectively monitor diabetic patients. I created a table in my SQL Workbench and named it Diabetes Database. So if we look on here, you can tell I had 5 tables total. So I have the coronary RF, which is coronary risk factor. I have the demographics. I have the glycemic control. I have the microvascular disease, and I have a patient ID table as well. So if we go under the patient ID, um, I have um, I developed 2 columns where you have patient 1, patient 2, patient 3, patient 4, and then I have a corresponding patient ID for each patient. So on here, if I take you back, guys, back to how I was able to populate this table, you can tell that for the patient name I use varchar, and then for the patient ID I use an integer for the numbers. Going back to um, the microvascular disease, um, so I have 3 columns. So I have the creatine clearance date, the albumin or creatine clearance date, albumin creatine clearance value, last date, like last dilated retina date. So you can tell here I made a few changes. Um, so if you go on here for um, my albumin and creatine clearance date, I went ahead to use the date and time. And then for the albumin creatine value, I used integer. And then for the last dilated retina date, I used date and time as my data type. Uh, so for my third table, um, here I have 2 columns in there. I have the A1C level, so the date again, and then I have the values here. So to populate my table, what I did was for the A1C date, for the data type, I chose date, and then for the A1C value for the data type, I chose integer. And then the next table was for the demographics. So for the demographics, I had 1 table for the payers, for 1 column for the payers, and I chose 4 different payers, which is Aetna, I have Cigna, I have Humana, and I chose Kaiser too. And these will be our top insurance companies for our patients. For the last table, which is the coronary risk factor, what I have here was 5 columns total. I had the last blood pressure date, I had the systolic blood pressure values, I have the diastolic blood pressure values, and I have last LDL date, which is the patient's cholesterol level, so the good and the bad cholesterols. And I have, which is the last column, I have the LDL value. So if I take you in here to how I populated my data, you can tell that for the last blood pressure, for my data type, I selected date. So it'll be easier for me to populate it with the date. For my systolic blood pressure, I use integer so I can get all the numbers that I wanted in there. Diastolic blood pressure, I went ahead and used integer too. Last LDL date, I used date as my data type. And then LDL value, I chose integer so I can populate it with any numbers that I wanted. This is my table that I populated for my diabetic patient registry, and this summarized my presentation for week 3 assignments. Thank you.